Hey gamers, welcome back to a gamer video. I finished Death Stranding 2 and I had the urge to replay MGS5 of all games. And I kind of had this thought. I went around the world with this game. I went from being disappointed with MGS5, then saying, well, it's not that bad, then being disappointed, and now I'm here. And I do get that MGS5 has a lot of problems, and I'm not gonna necessarily say that this game is a hidden masterpiece or anything like that. But I would say I had a lot of fun playing this game again. I do think that as tedious and repetitive the outposts are for the game, they are still kind of fun to sneak around. I do like the openness of the stealth, that it's not just confined to like a room or a building. That said, I do wish there were more variety. I do think that Peace Walker kind of nailed that a little bit better, where you're both going outside and like sneaking around there, and also going inside a base and going to like a lab or whatever. Like there's at least more varied areas to sneak around. Meanwhile, uh MGS5 is just the same kind of outpost there. You're kind of going in over and over. The only interesting areas to sneak around is OKB0. uh where else? I think that's honestly it. I guess the area when you're trying to get to Huey is kind of fun. That's a fun like sequence. Getting to Sahelanthropus is kind of fun. But I think that's like the same thing as OKB0, to be honest. I also liked the airport and the mission, the arms dealer, whatever. That was kind of a fun thing to sneak around. I also like voices just for the tone, but yeah, I do wish that it had like areas like Camp Omega and MGS5, and it's a bummer because the trailer did show like Camp Omega was going to be in the Phantom Pain, and then that never really happened, and then instead it became a map for the online game. uh Overall, I do think that MGS5 is kind of like the obviously the weakest in the franchise, but I do think there is a lot of fun to be had in this game. I liked a lot of the weapons you can make. I liked some of the areas you can sneak into, and some of the presentation of some of the stuff that you could do in this game. I like the buddy system. I liked a lot of what was there. I do wish there were more environments and this and that, but whenever you're playing it now, I'm just having fun again. It's just like, oh, this, like, it feels a little bit more fresh to me playing it and wanting to do the side missions more and this and that. Like, I don't think that this is an amazing game, and I wouldn't say it's my favorite Metal Gear game. Like, I'm not that deluded, but I do think it's actually uh fun to play. But the thing I want to talk about, because I was thinking about this the other day, when this story was released, a lot of people had a lot of issues with the story. And I get it. The story I don't think is that great either. I'm not gonna say the story is actually a masterpiece, guys, but there was one thing I was thinking about, and it was the vocal cord parasites. Because this part of the story, a lot of people mocked and said this was a really stupid motive for the main villain, Skullface, and I agree with that. I'm not gonna defend this, but I do think that there is an aspect to the vocal cord parasites that could have worked, that Kojima should have done, which is by the end game you get all these cassette tapes that really talk about a lot of stuff that I wish were cutscenes, right? But they they talk about how the vocal cord parasites were just kind of the prototype to the nanomachines, and how nanomachines control speech. Like, people can't say who the Patriots are. If they say Patriots, they will say lolly lolly lo instead. Like, all that stuff was kind of like originated from the vocal cord parasites. I think that is an interesting like aspect to the vocal cord parasites. I think that aspect of it was actually interesting and actually decent. I think what they should have done is not have the vocal cord parasites be the main motivator for Skullface, or even relevant for that. I think they should have been like, Cypher's been doing this research with vocal cord parasites. but they abandoned it because it didn't go anywhere for them, and or whatever. Like if they left it as a mystery for you to kind of think about, that I think would have been way better than let's put this in the main story that's gonna be the crux of the game, because I don't think it's that interesting of a plot point. I think what was more interesting that was never really focused on is just the relationship of XOF to Fox to Zero to Big Boss. All these moving parts, and there really was no strong thread connecting them other than they were in the same organization, they both knew Zero, they both disliked Zero, and that's it. Like there really isn't anything else there. And it's just shallow. It kind of makes me think of Portable Ops, where there was a plot point where Gene, the main villain of Portable Ops, tells Snake that Vulcan did not launch that nuke to that lab or whatever at the end of Virtuous mission on his own. He actually was told to do that by some shadowy guy that we don't know. And that was like, okay, that's interesting, but they never really go into who did that. No, I think it was alluded to in other ways where it's like, oh, maybe Zero did that, but I don't know why Zero would do that, to be honest, but whatever. It was just kind of a one-off plot twist that they threw in Portable Ops, and that's kind of what MGS5 made me feel. Like it's like, oh, this is just kind of like a throwaway plot twist that really doesn't amount to anything. Like there really isn't anything there. Now, of course, everyone's gonna talk about the elephant in the room, Venom Snake. This was a plot twist I did initially hate. I did not like it at all, and I thought, okay, who cares? Oh, wow, you made the player big boss through this, whatever. But uh, I do like that twist over time. I think the only issue is just the game doesn't do a good job hiding that or pretending as if that's something. Like they don't make the plot twist less obvious, and by having Snake not talk a lot, which is kind of a bummer, right? Which is a big thing. I mean, anyone can think whatever. Oh, it's because of Kiefer Sutherland or whatever. I just think they just didn't want him to have any lines, to be honest. But I do think that is kind of a bummer, and a big issue is that you could have had that plot twist and have Snake still talk. I mean, it's not like there was no reason for him not to talk, because it wasn't like there was a lot of instances that required him to know specific things in Big Boss's past either. Like he would have hated Skullface just as much as Big Boss did, uh, because of what happened in Ground Zeroes, right? So it was whatever. I do think that the overall like build up to it was kind of weak, but I do like it though. Overall, I do think it's actually uh, a fun little twist in the sense that uh, of just kind of how fucked up it is. Like you took this one guy and you molded him into a big boss. Which if you look at the story of Metal Gear, this is another iteration of a blueprint of a thing that actually happened in Metal Gear's like storyline, because Zero obviously wanted to make the next big boss. He wanted to have Big Boss for himself, whatever. Like that's what the whole deal with the Les Enfants Terrible project was. But this is another project of making another big boss through another method. That was kind of like obviously a Frankenstein's monster of a idea, because you see he has all these stitches. He's not a perfect copy, but he's a copy nonetheless, and he kind of inherits the same kind of prowess as Big Boss and the same kind of presence. He kind of inherits all of that. Uh, but he is in a way a Frankenstein's clone of Big Boss. So again, this kind of mirrors these other things that were going on within the shadow government in Metal Gear. Then you had the vocal cord parasites. As I said, it was just kind of a blueprint for the nanomachines. These things are good in like the background just to have you think about. But when you put them in the forefront, the only one I think would work in the forefront was obviously the Venom Snake thing. But the vocal cord parasites I don't think would have worked as the main plot point, because it's like you want to make the villain believable and be taken seriously. Nobody will be taking this seriously, and it's just one of these plot twists that, when you think about it, it's kind of stupid. Uh, and that's kind of a bummer when you had this good build up for Skullface and Ground Zeroes, where you're like, who is this guy? And Phantom Pain doesn't really care about building that up. Like, you don't really see Skullface that much. People like dog on Kiefer Sutherland and how little of a presence he had. He at least, him and the character Snake had more of a presence in the story that and affected things than Skullface did. All you hear about Skullface is, oh, he did this as pawns. This guy's a pawn for Skullface. Oh, Skullface orchestrated that. It's like you don't really see him do anything in any meaningful way or anything that makes you want to like go after him. Like MGS5's biggest theme was revenge. And look, you know, everyone's tired of me bringing up The Last of Us 2, but this is all I'll say about it. Last of Us 2 does at least a better job keeping revenge as a core theme of the story than MGS5 did. You play MGS5, are you thinking about what Skullface did in Ground Zeroes? Like, does that really come across your mind after the intro? Like, if you're on like mission 20, are you thinking about that? Probably not. When you finish chapter 1, are you thinking about it? Probably not. Like, I just think it's not that the revenge theme is kind of the weakest it's ever been. They try to keep it relevant with Miller being like Miller, but man, it's not there. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's missing in the story, and I do think that a lot of the story's issues are emphasized by Kojima's biggest flaw as a creator. His trailers are notoriously filled with spoilers. I do think that with Death Stranding being the only exception is that Death Stranding is a very like uh um nonsensical trailer. Like, you can't get any form of context if you watch any trailer. Like, they showed a cutscene at Games Fest for Death Stranding 2, and it really was like, what was the point? Like, and that cutscene did show up like near the end of the game. So it's like I don't know why they showed that cutscene. It's like really late in the game. Uh, but there's no context, so it's not like you're not getting spoiled on something. Like, it doesn't tell you anything that you wouldn't know going in without seeing it or whatever. But it was worse with Metal Gear Solid, for example. With MGS4, I remember uh I don't know if it was an interview or if it was in the Kojima Productions podcast. Does anyone remember the Kojima Productions podcast with Ryan Payton? There was, I think it was either an interview or in that podcast, Ryan Payton said he was fighting with Kojima to not release and to edit out some scenes of the MGS4 TGS 2007 trailer. That trailer, if you don't remember, had scenes that had Metal Gear Rex in the trailer and Shadow Moses. Mostly where you fight Ray. That's what they showed in the trailer. And Ryan Payne was saying you should not have that in the trailer. That's a huge spoiler. Like, that should be cut from the trailer. And obviously Kojima got his way and said, no, we're keeping this trailer as is. We're not removing anything. Which is like, Shadow Moses was a big deal in MGS4, and you just kind of threw that into a trailer before the game even released. But that's like the most, like, that's the latest example of this. MGS5 is the biggest egregious example of trailers over promising to absurd degrees. And I think you could, if you really wanted to, make the argument that Kojima purposely made these trailers the way they were so that Konami can like get all these people angry. It's like, yeah, look at all the cool stuff you could have had, but whatever. This is like, but that's like really trying at that point. I do think that he just loves making trailers. I just think he likes making these like very emotional pieces in trailers to get you invested in and all that. I do think that when you talk about the development of MGS5, it's always either Kojima or Konami, but I think it's very naive to think it's one of them when it's just very easily both of them. Konami did a lot of things that are not pro worker, let's say, and Kojima has done stuff that's also pretty bad. Like he did go over budget, most likely. It's not cheap getting Kiefer Sutherland, building a whole engine from the ground up, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm sure that didn't make the cost any cheaper. Uh, and he could have like adjusted better for the project that he has. I think a lot of his stuff was overly ambitious for what the game was. Then you have Konami that just decided, well, we're gonna fire this guy, and then we're gonna like put him in a room, isolate him, and we're just going to like do this. Which, this is stuff that Japanese businesses do tend to do to people who they want to either push to fire or push them to quit or to kind of like push them out a little bit. They kind of reassign them to an area that's not desirable, and then they're gonna eventually leave. Whatever, like that's kind of what they do to get them to leave, basically. So I do believe these reports that Konami was abusing their workers and this and that. But again, I'm not gonna say it's just Konami because it takes two to dance. And I think both parties are to blame in MGS5's not risky uh development. I just think that there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and I do think when you get to chapter 2, I wouldn't be surprised if chapter 2 is kind of when that friction started, because chapter 1 had the most complete cohesive story. If the game ended with chapter 1, I don't think anyone would be that upset as they were. I mean, they may not like the game still, but they probably would not be superly disappointed with it, comparatively speaking, because chapter 2 just kind of twists the knife a little bit more, because the heavy grind, all these side ops to get all this stuff happening, to then get one story that gets resolved, which is like the Venom Snake reveal and all that, and then they give you a cliffhanger ending that does not get resolved like at all. So it's just kind of like, what was the point of chapter 2? Like, a lot of this stuff could have just been thrown in at the end of chapter 1, and that's it, and we didn't need the, uh, uh, the whole thing with the Lord of the Flies chapter that never happened. So it's just kind of like, chapter 2 is just the biggest issue with MGS5, gameplay wise and story wise. Uh, but as I'm replaying it, I'm still having fun with it. Like, that's the crazy part. Because I know once I get to chapter 2, it's gonna be like, it's gonna be whatever. But I've been enjoying doing these side missions and the main missions and this and that. So I do think there is a degree of fun in this game. It's just a bummer that it had a lot of, like, pitfalls with it. So that is my current thoughts on MGS5. But before I go, I do want to bring this up. I think it's funny, in my opinion. I have never seen a game get so much cope in my life. I would even argue cope was not a thing on the internet until MGS5 happened, because after that game was released, after Kojima left, even when Death Stranding was like announced and all this other stuff, there would be articles and articles and articles of people saying, guys, Chapter 3's in the game. Chapter 3's in the game. We just have to do the nuclear disarmament in the game, and once you do that, Chapter 3's gonna happen, guys. They're gonna release it. And of course, that's not gonna happen. First off, that whole idea of the nuclear disarmament thing, I think was the most overly ambitious thing that would never happen. Because I don't know the criteria of it, because if I, like, delete a save file, open up a new save file, would that still consider as two bases or just one base? Uh, what about people who are continuously playing the game or buying the game or whatever, or people who stop playing the game? Like, I don't quite understand uh, how it would decide what would be like the amount to disarm to get that cutscene, because that cutscene is in the game, but you have to like trigger it by doing that nuclear disarmament thing. But you have to do it with every base, but every base can also build a new nuke. So I never really understood it, and it's like, yeah, nobody's doing this. I don't like, even if the entire planet of people who bought this game decide, let's do it, let's do nuclear disarmament. I still don't think it's gonna happen because I just think it's not. It's such a weird system, and the criteria is not very clear. And especially when like Konami has said like, oh, there are people cheating, so we're gonna like change it and we're gonna do this. Like it was very weird, and it's like, yeah, this isn't gonna happen. Fuck this. Like I don't know why they bothered with this idea. Like it's just too much. So I'm like, yeah, they're not. Chapter 3 is not through this. Like that's not true. Then there'd be articles saying, guys, what if the trailers were actually meant to create a phantom pain? Like you play the game and like, and it's like I don't think that's the case either. I just think it's just very simple. He loves making trailers, and he just happened to make a dud game. Kojima is just like anyone else. He's just as capable of making bad games as anyone else that's capable of making good games. But uh the game is fun. It just has a lot of issues. I just think it's funny that this game has generated so much cope that they refuse to accept the fact that MGS5 is just a very disappointing game. But I do think it's very fun. I do think it's a fun, disappointing game. I think there are issues with it, but uh, I've just found myself just having more fun this time around than I did previously, where it's like, I don't care if this game is not finished, whatever, I'm having fun. And some of the plot twists, I think I kind of came around on. Like, I did like the Venom Snake twist a lot more than I did initially. The Vocalcore Parasites, I just have a different like kind of outlook on them. I don't like them as a main story thing, but if it was like a background thing where it's kind of like planting the seeds of nanomachines, that's one thing. I do also think it's funny that the vocal cord parasites is basically MGS5's nanomachines, where it's just they kind of serve the same purpose, where it's just a plot device, and it's so like in your face that you're just kind of like you're just like, why at that point? But I do think Volcro parasites do have an interesting concept, but I just don't think it works as a main story thing. If it was just a thing that was written off for the nanomachines, that's one thing. But whatever. So that's my current thoughts on MGS5. I'm gonna keep playing it, and I'll maybe do another video describing more of my thoughts on this journey of replaying MGS5. Because right now I've been having fun with it, and yeah, that's all I gotta say about it for now. I'll see you in the next one. Uh, have a good one, and bye. Wait, bye.